Welcome to the Deep 404. You may have heard the story of the US Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin and his recent hospitalisation. There's something going on around this story. Maybe nothing, maybe something, but it does seem interesting at this stage. Now, I spoke about this on a video yesterday, and I mentioned it because Dima from the Military Summary Channel had mentioned it. And I'll just talk through a little bit about this. So on the 22nd of December, Lloyd Austin, so the US Secretary of Defense, so the top guy at the Pentagon, reportedly went in for prostate cancer operation, surgery, 22nd of December. Then on the 1st of January, he was reportedly readmitted to the ICU, suffering complications after that surgery, and had been hospitalised in ICU for about 4 days. And during that period of time, and in fact until just the start of this week, he had not announced really to anyone, not to Anthony Blinken, not to Jake Sullivan, not to his deputy, not to Joe Biden, that he was incapacitated and that he was in ICU. His staff initially, when the story came out, had covered and said, oh, he's working from home. But then the story came out that he wasn't working from home. He was actually in the ICU. There was then a cover story that Austin's chief of staff had the flu, and that's why no one was notified, because his chief of staff was sick and wasn't able to notify anyone that Lloyd Austin was, well, first of all, had cancer and then was in hospital, had surgery, and then was back in the ICU for a number of days. Going through just a little bit of this timeline here, this is according to the Hill newspaper. Doctors from Mr. Austin said a checkup in December 23 identified prostate cancer which required treatment. Mr. Austin underwent a minimally invasive surgical procedure at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, the nation's top military hospital, on the 22nd of December to remove the cancer. He was under general anaesthesia for this procedure. He then returned to hospital on the 1st of January 2024 after experiencing complications, and an evaluation revealed a urinary tract infection. He was transferred to the intensive care unit the next day for further treatment, including for abdominal fluid collections impairing the function of his small intestines. He never lost consciousness and never underwent general anaesthesia during this hospital stay, doctors say. Mr. Austin's infection has cleared and he continues to make progress, and we anticipate a full recovery, although this can be a slow process. Doctors emphasised that cancer was caught early and said that his prognosis is excellent. A spokesman for Mr. Austin did not provide an update for when he would be discharged, but said Secretary Austin continues to recover well and remains in good spirits. Now, Secretary Austin, he's a 70-year-old man. You would imagine that he's relatively fit, senior military, does a lot of international travelling, so I imagine he's got some level of fitness. A couple of questions about this. The prostate cancer thing. Now, I would imagine someone in his position of security and in the chain of command, I think he's something like 6 in chain of command. If the top 5 of Biden and Kamala and whoever else get knocked over by buses, then I think he's about number 6. So he's extremely important. My layman's guess would be that he undergoes regular medical checkups to ensure his health and safety and fitness for the job. So while a prostate cancer may have appeared, I suppose, that you would normally have thought that had it appeared that it would be something which would be very mild, or he would have had some indication before, and this wouldn't have been a shock to Biden. John Kirby's come out and said that they didn't know that he had prostate cancer until this week. So perhaps he didn't know. Maybe it is rapid, like within the last time he had a medical 6 months ago or something like that, it's come on. However, it doesn't appear as though it had come on in a terribly strong way. His prognosis is excellent. They've said the cancer was caught very early. He had a minimally invasive surgical procedure. So there's that. But then he returned to hospital on the 1st of January. So 9 days later, experiencing complications. I'm not a doctor. I don't know if that's normal. That might be a normal time frame to experience complications after this type of surgery, sort of 9 or 10 days later. But he was transferred to an intensive care unit for a urinary tract infection. And he was 1st of January after experiencing complications, and an evaluation revealed a urinary tract infection. Now, again, maybe there is a broad spectrum of urinary tract infections that you can have. I know that in old people, they can be quite dangerous. Their immune systems aren't good. That infection can spread and they require antibiotics and I guess occasionally hospitalisation. As I say, he's not that old. He's 70. And he had 4 days, or at least 4 days, in the ICU ward. So not just general admission, you've got a bit of a urinary tract infection. Here, take these antibiotics and go home and you'll be fine. In the ICU. Another interesting comment made that during this period of time, he never lost consciousness and never underwent general anaesthesia. Why that was mentioned, I don't know. If he's in there for a urinary tract infection, I would have imagined it would be he's on antibiotics and, that's it. I wouldn't have thought you would have to specify that he'd never lost consciousness or underwent general anaesthesia during that time. He continues to make progress and we anticipate a full recovery. Now, this is beginning to sound like something more than just a urinary tract infection. This is beginning to sound like some sort of serious either illness or, injury to his body somehow. Doctors emphasised the cancer was caught early and said that its prognosis is excellent. He continues to recover well. This has come from his spokesman. And he remains in good spirits. Now, he hasn't been seen since this. I don't think he's been seen since the 22nd of December, but he's not been seen since the 1st of January. It's now the 11th of January. Seems like things just don't quite add it up here. Now, just on a side note here, Eric Smith, who is a senior Marine general, and Lloyd Austin's obviously involved with the Marines. He is currently recovering from open heart surgery that occurred earlier this week. Allegedly, he had a heart attack in October, 28th of October of 2023, and he has had some defect with his heart and he's needed to go in and have open heart surgery, and he's reportedly recovering from that now. So, just one other little thing that I'll just throw in here is that Austin has carried out in the past a number of secret trips to Ukraine. He's not the only person. So, in April of 2022, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, made a surprise unannounced visit to Ukraine in April of 2022. No less than President Biden himself did in February of 2023. He made an unannounced visit to Ukraine. In June of 23, the CIA director, Bill Burns, made an undisclosed secret trip to Ukraine. Blinken did another one in September of 2023, just a few months ago. And on the 23rd of November, just 2 months ago, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin made another surprise trip to Ukraine. Now, why am I saying all of this stuff? And well, there's some interesting Twitter feeds, and there's Dima from the Military Summary Channel's recent episode. And there's the knowledge that over the last 2 weeks period, so from about Christmas, 25th of December, just after that, the 28th of December, and then the 2nd, 3rd of January, through that period of time, Russia has reportedly launched some of the largest missile strikes on Ukraine ever. And we know that there were serious strikes in Kyiv. There were videos coming out showing it. I've also gone through in a video yesterday that for the first time, Ukraine has not claimed to have shot down all of the missiles that were fired, or nearly all of them, not the majority of them anyhow. So there has been successful Russian missile strikes, and those strikes reportedly have been on military infrastructure, including military command centres. So we've got Eric Smith, a senior Marine general. We've got Lloyd Austin, both of them in hospital now, recovering, reportedly. However, Lloyd Austin, some confusion about it being announced when he was in hospital, that he was in ICU, how long he might be in there for, how he's recovering, what he's actually suffering from. And there are some reports coming out that these guys aren't suffering from heart surgery and from a urinary tract infection, that they're suffering from wounds suffered due to Russian missile strikes on NATO command centres in Ukraine. Now, I can't confirm that that is the case, and if you saw my earlier video when I spoke about this after seeing Dima's announcement of it, I was fairly skeptical of it, and I still am relatively skeptical of it. But the story around Lloyd Austin isn't dispelling the myth. It's not like he's now popped up, he's on lots of video, he's walking around, he's healthy, he's got no bandages on him or anything like that. He's moving freely, maybe just holding his stomach a bit because his bladder's been a bit sore. That's not happened. And instead, we're getting reports that, well, he's recovering well, but this could take some time. These things take time. We don't know how long it will take. Again, for urinary tract infection, generally, I would imagine a course of antibiotics for most people, and you'd be right in a few days. I'm not a doctor. I'm just sort of talking from experience through life, hearing about people having urinary tract infections. I don't think they normally take that long to clear up. So, if he had been in Ukraine, and he does make these surprise trips, these unannounced trips, Ukraine's obviously having troubles at the moment. The US and the government are having troubles with Ukraine and trying to get their money's worth out of them. Maybe he was over there. Maybe he was even there with Eric Smith, the Marine general. Maybe they were there in a NATO command centre talking to Ukrainians about what needs to happen with the defensive position of Ukraine in the coming months, how they need to get through to get Biden re-elected. Who knows? And maybe the strike occurred on the command centre and Austin was injured in this, and he was rushed back by military folk to hospital, and perhaps things were touch and go for a while. And so rather than announce to everyone that he was in hospital, it was kept quiet for a few days. And then perhaps he's pulled through and has come right, and now a story is being put together to cover this period of time when no announcement was made. Now, the announcement being delayed is not good for him. He is apparently now going to be facing some sort of an impeachment inquiry, is being called, because of a dereliction of duty, because he should have informed people that he was unwell. Someone in his position who had to have prostate surgery, who had a urinary tract infection, I'm just guessing that these aren't major things for him, and that he would say, hey, I've got to take a day off and go to hospital and I'm having some minor surgery. If people ask, that's why I'm taking the day off. Oh, what minor surgery? Nothing major. It's minor surgery. It happens to everyone my age. Don't worry about it. Could have even alluded there was something like prostate and then laughed about it. But this isn't what happened. He decided to bury it. The whole thing has been buried for days and no one told about it. It feels like it's something more serious. Now, maybe the cancer was really bad. Maybe that's what it was. But again, weird timing. 22nd has the operation, all seemed good. 10 days later, after the first round of the big Russian missile strikes, he pops up, he's back in ICU. He's in ICU for 4 days, but he never lost consciousness or underwent any general anaesthesia. We don't want that getting out there. I don't know. I might be just being very cynical and sceptical on this. Maybe it'll all come out in the wash, and that story of him having a urinary tract infection is exactly what happened, and no relation whatever to Eric Smith, the Marine General. However, there are, as I say, stories in social media now, even stories in Twitter, coming out talking about this, and one of them indicating that both of these men, Lloyd Austin and Eric Smith, may have been in Ukraine at the time. I guess we'll wait and see on this one. Just wait and see, I suppose. Ukraine's air defence, though, isn't doing well. I've taken this here. What I'm just going to read through here is from Ukrainian reporting. So this isn't Russian assessment, this is Ukrainian assessment. The Ukrainian Air Force Commander Mykola Oleshchuk has given an end-of-year announcement, and he has said, although the results of the current year are traditionally summed up today, I will announce some impressive figures from the beginning of the full-scale invasion of the occupier. So he's talking about the Russian occupation starting in February 2022. Since February 24th, 2022, the Defence Force of Ukraine has destroyed 1,709 missiles of various types. Of the X-101 555 type missiles, 1,360 were launched, 1,045 were destroyed, 77% destruction or success rate in intercepting them. Of the Kaliber, the 834 were launched, 397 were destroyed, 47% success rate. Of the Iskander, now the Iskander, these large ballistic missiles launched from a vehicle, a stand-up vehicle. These are the ones that are in the news now because North Korea has reportedly provided a number of these to Russia, and Russia has used some of them. The US has come out with a fiery statement basically saying, how dare North Korea support Russia, ignoring the fact that there are all of those European and Western and NATO nations supporting Ukraine, providing weapons to them. But anyhow, Iskander, 154 launched, 62 destroyed, 40% success rate. Shahid 136 and 131 drones, 3,940 launched, 3,095 destroyed, 78% success rate. He then goes on to say, at the same time, that the air defence forces shoot down about 86% of all aerial targets. Now, we know that there's been no reported Ukrainian successful shooting down of Russian aircraft for some months now. There has been one Su-34 which went down about 2 or 3 weeks ago, but it was reportedly most likely due to Russian friendly fire, air defence, but may have been Ukrainians, there may have been one there. So they're saying that they're averaging at 86% shooting down aerial targets. However, when you go through and just average out those numbers there, like roughly, it's getting down near 60%, not 86%. There's only 40% of the Iskanders shot down, 47% of the Kalibras shot down, 77% of the X-101s shot down. Now, these numbers, if they are correct, will be declining. The success rate will be declining on these. The likelihood that that they are achieving these numbers any more is highly unlikely, given that we've seen the recent videos of air defence systems being destroyed. We've had reports that more of them, Patriot systems, have been struck and damaged, and we're seeing video of these missiles now getting through. If we go on from there, we can see that the air defence is a challenge which Ukraine needs to overcome if it is going to remain capable of defending itself, let alone embarking upon another offence in the future. Now, part of the reason why these numbers here, these are Ukrainian numbers, why I think that they are likely to be inflated is because that often happens in war, and because we have had multiple Ukrainian reports where there has been reported very high success rate or complete success in destroying, Russian missiles and drones, and yet we have had conflicting Ukrainian evidence at the same time reporting on the destruction or impact of facilities within an area where there was a claim made that all of these missiles were shut down. Also, the speed of some of these missiles makes it very unlikely that they would be successfully shot down in these numbers. Anyhow, the spokesman for the Kremlin, Dmitry Peskov, he has been speaking about negotiations with Ukraine, and Ukraine, if they're unable to keep their air defence systems operational, will rapidly be forced to a point where they will need to negotiate. Dmitry Peskov, the spokesman, has said that the Ukraine and Western nations are negotiating, but they are negotiating with themselves. He says this is very strange to leave Russia out. He goes on saying that Russia is willing to negotiate. However, there is currently a de facto law in place prohibiting President Zelensky from negotiating with Russia while President Putin remains in power. So he says, there is still nothing on any peace process. Very difficult processes are going on with this peace formula of Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Some countries are discussing some kind of peace formula without Russia's participation. A very strange process. But nothing else. That is, there is nothing serious in this plan. And de facto, there is still a legally enshrined refusal of Kyiv to negotiate. We are continuing with our special military operation. Zelensky proposed the so-called peace formula in November 2022. It does not imply any steps on the part of Kyiv and assumes compensation for losses from the fighting at Moscow's expense. While promoting the peace formula, Ukraine has repeatedly rejected third-party offers and mediation. And this is true. We've had announcements that China, for example, and even some of the South African nations have offered to mediate and put forward proposed peace proposals. And the likelihood of these negotiations with Zelensky in place is the possibility is low, which has been paralysed because of Zelensky signing a decree banning any talks with Moscow under Vladimir Putin's presidency. At the same time, Russia has emphasised that it has not refused to negotiate with Ukraine. So we see here Zelensky refusing to negotiate while President Putin's in power. Now, it doesn't look likely, or doesn't seem likely, that President Putin is going to be out of power anytime soon. So negotiations need to occur somehow, or we're going to see that Ukraine will continue to be wrecked. Now, talking about approval ratings, this is from the Active Group, which they do polling, it seems, in the Ukrainian polling group. Now, they have come out with a report, and this has interestingly just come out a few days after Yulia Tymoshenko, a former Prime Minister of Ukraine, made some announcements which gave the indication that she would be willing to play a negotiating role. She would be willing to be the next president of Ukraine, to work with the US and to work well with Russia and negotiate out of the current conflict. So while there have been reports that President Zelensky's approval has been dropping, that many people in Ukraine are unhappy with what he's doing, the Active Group has come out with reporting that says Ukrainians trust President Zelensky at 71% versus the previous president, Pyotr Poroshenko. They trust him only at 18%. And Prime Minister Julia Tymoshenko, they trust her only at 7.5%. Poroshenko heads the European Solidarity Party, while the leader of the Batkivshchina for the Fatherland Party, Tymoshenko, is only trusted by 7.5%. Among Ukrainian politicians, Vladimir Zelensky is the most trusted. 71% of the country's citizens support him, while only 22% of respondents disapprove of his job as president. So this is interesting Ukrainian reporting coming out from a Ukrainian site saying that President Zelensky's approval ratings are very high, super high, far higher, and he's far more trusted than any of the possible competitors that he may face. Now, Zelensky has postponed the elections that were meant to be happening in 2024, saying that they're in a war. It's not the right time for elections. People are more interested in him getting on with the job of winning the war than wasting their time on elections. There has been, from a number of Ukrainian sources, the call that the reason he has done this is because he is aware that he will not survive an election and will not be president after an election. One would think if he really did have 71% approval rating, that he would flip an election tomorrow and breeze through and then not have to worry about it for 3 or 4 years. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So, interesting things going on in air defence updates from Ukraine and in approval rating updates from Ukraine. And you can tell that I'm skeptical of these because there is such a wealth of contrary information and information that seems to make good logical sense. As I say, fast Russian missiles, some of them operating at speeds of Mach 9 and Mach 10. Some of them operating at speeds of Mach 4 and Mach 5, unlikely to be stopped by Ukrainian air defence, likely to be destroying Patriot systems, which gives me pause when I see those Ukrainian numbers, when I've also seen a lot of the other Ukrainian reporting indicating wildly unbelievable and in some cases provably false claims of the success of air defence in areas where there has then been reports from Ukrainian channels or Ukrainian sources that there were missiles that made it through and caused damage. Anyhow, a little bit of news on Russia. The Russian North Sea route shipping increases. So the North Sea route, I may have a picture of this somewhere. Did I keep it? Here we go. Can you see that? Just on the screen there. This is Russia on the right, Canada, United States, Canada on the left, Greenland. The Northern Sea route is this line, this sort of dotted line following the mouse cursor up along here, up to there. It's about a 5,600 kilometre. It goes from Novaya Zemlya Straits in the west down here, along the Russian Arctic coast, above Siberia, through the Kara Sea, the Laptev Sea, the East Siberian Sea, and the Chukchi Sea to Cape Dezhnev on the Bering Strait up here. And the Bering Strait is where it's that tiny little gap, I think it's about 100 kilometres maybe, between the United States and Russia at that point. Actually, looking at this view of the world, which is not one you normally see on a map or a globe unless you spin it around, you can see just how close the United States and Russia are. This gives you this legend here. That's 500 nautical miles, that distance there. So as you can see, it's nothing here, here, here. It's all along this coastline here. It's less than 500 nautical miles between the two nations. So anyhow, in this area, the cargo traffic in 2023 has reached 36.25 million metric tons, which is 250,000 tonnes above the target for the 2023 year. 10 years ago, in 2013, it was 2.13 million metric tonnes. It's now 36.25 million metric tonnes. The year before last, in 2022, 47 transit voyages were made along the Northern Sea Route. And last year, in 2023, that is increased to 80 transit voyages made, so up from 47 to 80 in a year. This is due to the pivoting of Russian gas and oil companies from servicing the West to servicing the East and the global South. Russia looking to open up those routes and heading around to the east of Russia, down to China and that sort of down into Asia and that way, rather than directly to the west and into Europe there. So a pivoting there. There's interest in that area. Apparently China has also bought some lower level Arctic vessels to be able to trade up there at some time. They have requested escort support from Russia. I imagine that's probably with Russian icebreakers to enable them to get through if it gets too thick. So China also looking at opening up routes there, no doubt from China into Russia and perhaps on through to the west as well. An interesting article that I read yesterday too, it's talking about icebreakers, is that apparently the US is having a challenge with its icebreakers. It's Coast Guard icebreakers. It hasn't deployed a new one. From memory, it's been since like the 70s, perhaps the early 70s was the last time or mid 70s, the last time they created and released a big icebreaker. And the article is about the fact that the US engineers are needing to relearn and remember how to work with steel of that thickness. So to make the big, super thick, curved, strong ice-breaking hull on the front of an icebreaker, it's something they've not had to do for nearly 50 years. They just haven't built icebreakers since the 70s. And so for that reason, those people who knew how to do it back in the 70s have retired. Those skills haven't been kept. And so they're now having to relearn how to do that. This is an interesting feature of knowledge, that if you don't use it, you learn it. Like in all scales, some of the maths questions you could have done when you were a teenager because you were practicing them at school, try them doing when you're my age, you just don't remember how to do them. You've forgotten them. You haven't used it anymore. It's not there. That knowledge goes institutionally as well. And it may even be written down. There may be books written down for how to do it, but the people who actually did it and had the skill have moved on, and they haven't trained the apprentices to give them those skills. There's also some other reports I read a little while ago when the West was talking about the challenges it was having with producing shells. There's ammunition, 155mm rounds. They were talking there about the same thing, that the number of people in industry with the skill and experience to build these weapons, to maintain the production lines and operate them at high efficiency, just are no longer there, because a lot of those production lines have closed down. The company's actually closed and gone away, and all those people who had those jobs have worked somewhere else now. They either may be older, retired, dead, or may not be interested in coming back to that field of work again. They might be now working as computer engineers and happy doing that instead of working with explosives in a greasy factory. I don't know. Other factories will just have downsized. The big lines will have been turned off, and smaller groups of smaller people making smaller numbers, and they're perhaps not in such great demand. So all that loss of knowledge happens across your industries if you're not working in them. And this is something which reportedly Russia hasn't suffered as badly with, because it has kept scale in a lot of its military and industrial production, whereas the US has focused on globalization and offshoring, so getting things built elsewhere. Not in war where they need a lot of shells. You can close those factories down, so they've lost those skills. So challenges for everyone, but it seems as though the US are suffering from that particularly, and some of the some of the European nations like Germany as well, who haven't been in active conflict for a long time and have then de-industrialized in that military sense, making it more difficult for them now to turn those systems back on again. It's a little bit of news on Belarus. Now, Belarus is, of course, just up north of Ukraine. I've got a map here somewhere which might show us. Here we go. This is I'll just zoom in a little bit for you. This is Ukraine here and Belarus up here on the top. Belarus Security Council Alexander Volfovich has reported that Ukraine has laid 500,000 mines, anti-personnel, anti-tank mines on the border with Ukraine. So it's around this Mazia region, this region around here, it seems to be. So the area north of Kyiv, I would imagine it's probably focusing from here, this border with Russia, down and around this area here. So as to provide some protection to Kyiv from forces from Belarus coming down. You may recall that some time ago, a number of the Wagner forces went to Belarus, and there was some talk that they may push down through perhaps near Gomel to Chernihiv or down through here to come in and sort of help to flank Kyiv when an assault on Kyiv was to be made. Anyhow, 500,000 mines laid along there, it seems. Also, Alexander Volfovich, the Belarusian Security Council Secretary, has stated concerns that he believes that the Ukrainian forces may attempt to influence or disrupt the upcoming Belarusian election. There are lower House of Representatives elections in February coming up. And then there is a further election, I think, in early 2025. But he believes or is suggesting that Ukraine is training saboteurs, groups to influence or to infiltrate Belarus and look to destabilize the situation in Belarus leading up to the elections. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has said earlier this year that it's not going to be an easy one for the country, the election, with hostile forces seeking to stir things up ahead and during the upcoming parliamentary and local elections. So who knows if that is the case, but that's what Belarus is reporting at this stage. President Putin just has been to some factories, talking to some people, and he there has announced that the Russian unemployment rate is 2.9%. This has never been the case before in the history of the Russian Federation. But at the same time, an important factor to consider is the country is experiencing a huge deficit of human resources, first and foremost of highly skilled workers. So as I was saying before, you lose your skilled workers after a period of time. Russia may be suffering a slightly different problem here in that it has moved to a war footing and it's got these record unemployment lows, 2.9% unemployment for Russia, which is, as President Putin has said, is unheard of, low level. But the problem with skilled workers, part of it will be because they have moved to a war footing, they are expanding domestic production massively. That means that while they may have the skills, and some skilled workers, they don't have enough to be able to reach the capacity that they want. He further went on to talk about programs to get industries perhaps to invest, to build those specialised skills in the areas that they need. And so that, that's something that a program it looks like the Russians are trying to undertake to address the labour shortage that they have because of this increase in domestic production. Couple of other things. Just a couple of other things here. Let me just grab a picture that I wanted to show you. So this here is reportedly what may be coming. This is from TASS, Russian newspaper. What might be coming in 2024 for Russian military tech. So there are Kinjal and Zircon missiles. The production of these will increase. The Kinjals are air-launched missiles which reach a maximum speed of Mach 10. The Zircons are ship-launched missiles, so anti-ship, but also can be used for large targets like power generation plants, that type of thing. And they travel at a speed of up to Mach 9. There are also On the menu for 2024, 2 new Tu-160M strategic bombers, 3 submarines, 1 Knyaz Pujarski-Borov A-class strategic nuclear submarine. These are the type of things that can sort of stay underwater indefinitely with their nuclear, if they're nuclear-powered submarines. 11 surface warships. These will be, no doubt, to replace some of the ones that have been damaged by the Ukrainian strikes over the course of the conflict. And the Sarmat ICBM will enter combat duty. Now, the Sarmat ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile. So these are the big things which are fired up effectively to the edge of space and then let the Earth rotate a bit, I guess, and then down onto their target. The speed that these can reach is phenomenal. I mean, the speed of the Kinjal at Mach 10 is incredible speed, but these Sarmats can reach a speed of Mach 27, and they're travelling at 33,000 kilometres per hour at the fastest part of their flight. They have a range of 18,000 kilometres, and they're going to enter active service in 2024. So they can house a nuclear warhead, they can have a high explosive warhead. But again, something like that, very expensive. You wouldn't use them very often. But if you did at that speed, I don't think there's any air defence system on Earth that could stop them at this stage. All right, just one last little thing that I'll go through, maybe 2 things. Talking about President Zelensky and challenges to him and the fact that he won't negotiate with Russia, and that apparently the US is wanting to talk to him. They need to negotiate because they want to manage the Ukrainian conflict up to the election in 2024. They don't want anything out of hand happening there. These Viktor Medvedchuk. Could President Putin perhaps be planning to assist in positioning him as a new Ukrainian leader? He is a personal friend of President Putin. He was a previous member of the Ukrainian parliament, the Verkhovna Rada. He was a member of parliament from 1997 to 2002. He served then between 2002 and 2005 as a chief of staff to then Ukrainian President Leonid Kuchma. He was then absent from the national politics until about 2018, and then he was elected in 2018 as the chairman for the political council of the political party For Life, which later merged into the opposition party, the For Life Party. In the 2019 Ukrainian parliamentary election, the party won 37 seats on the nationwide party list and 6 constituency seats. And he placed 3rd on the 2019 election list of opposition platform, and when he was then elected for the Verkhovna Rada. He was, as of February 2022, however, when the Russian forces crossed into Ukrainian territory, Medvedchuk was put under house arrest under suspicion of treason. It's believed he's a Russian-friendly Ukrainian. He's a supporter of Russia. We look for closer ties with Russia. He was actually sent to Russia in September 2022 as part of a prisoner swap. But he is someone that you could imagine President Putin may be happy to work with as a new Ukrainian leader. So there are a lot of names starting to pop up now as possible people who would look to replace President Zelensky. And so there's obviously been General Zaluzhny is one, Kirilo Budanov, the intelligence head, Yulia Tymoshenko, some military people, some previous advisors of President Zelensky, and some politicians, but now Viktor Medvedchuk, possibly. He is popping up on the scene again, starting to talk about what could happen in Ukraine. He, to me, sounds like someone that could be instilled, given that he has in the past had some success with parties there. It may be tougher for him to get in in what is remaining of Ukraine, given what's remaining of Ukraine, would tend to be very pro-Ukrainian, you would think. However, they may realise and recognise that if they don't want more Russian forces moving westwards across the country, there needs to be some negotiation and some loss of oblasts to Russia. And perhaps Medvedchuk may be able to get in by promoting himself or selling himself as the person who can guarantee good relations with Russia. Who knows? But getting to hear more and more stories about possible replacements for President Zelensky coming up these days. And just one last thing then, just a little bit on the front line, just in terms of Kupiansk. Now, in Kupiansk, which is on the northern part of the front line, there is a township there of Sinkovka. And Sinkovka, the Russians have been fighting over for months now, it seems. There's just a little bit here I grabbed from a Russian Telegram channel where they talk about this. And it says, there are huge fields that prevent you from getting around Sinkova to the east. It is impossible to go around Sinkova to the west through the forest because this zone is under full fire control of the Ukrainian armed forces from the other higher bank of the Oskol. The Oskol is the Oskol River, which runs down through Sinkovka and Kupiansk. So they're saying they can't get in from the eastern side. The Russians are coming in from the east. They can't get in on the eastern side because there are these large fields there. You're just a sitting duck out in the fields. They can't get round the top and come in through the forest because the forest is under full fire control of the Ukrainians who hold the higher ground on the higher bank of the river. He said the Ukrainians can attack through the forest because it gives them cover, and the Russians don't have their positions dialed in with artillery already. They would be randomly shooting in that area. But he says they cannot respond because they will be in full view if they move into those fields. The best option is not to attack at all in the Sinkovka area, but to freeze here and work in other places. So Sinkovka, perhaps the Russians going to not try to take it now, move to somewhere which is just easier to take. This seems to be a tactic the Russians will employ. They're not in an all-out offensive, so they don't need to be capturing every township. Instead, what they could do is work around it, pick off smaller ones where the terrain is more conducive to advancing, and then do like they've done around Bakhmut and around Avdiivka, and effectively encircle Sinkovka and cut it off without having to fight for it per se. So that may happen there. Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister of Russia, in an announcement yesterday, has hinted that Russian forces are progressing along the front line, doing very well, but they are not in an offensive. They are just aggressively attriting Ukrainian forces, undertaking perhaps this tactics of mowing the lawn, as they call it, moving forwards and then pulling back to let the Ukrainian troops come into an area where they're able to then shell them and attack them with drones. And while Russian forces are having successes all along the front lines, Sergei Shoigu hasn't given the indication that this is any part of an offensive, at least not yet. And so while an offensive may come in a push to the Dnieper in some areas, that's not what we're seeing at this stage. And so we would expect to see different activity from the Russians if and when that offensive does begin. Okay, I think I'll leave it there today. I hope you're enjoying the channel. If you are, please share with your friends if you think they would enjoy it. And if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. I look forward to talking to you again soon.